Good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Today's topic is on year-end training for Sage 100 Contractor with presenter Steve Kruder. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is on mute, so if you have questions, please type them into the questions box, and we will address them at the end of the session. Today's presentation will be recorded, and we will send out a copy to everyone later today. I will now turn it over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Krista. So welcome to the year-end webinar for Sage 100 Contractor. I'm going to go over the agenda briefly. The supported versions of Sage 100 Contractor for year-end 2018. We're going to talk about preparing Sage 100 companies for year-end with company database backups, payroll audits, adjusting calculation settings for your W-2 boxes, the ACA setup, the Affordable Care Act. Then we're going to discuss closing and archiving payroll data for version 21 of Sage 100. We're going to discuss the integration with federal and state reports.
Steve, you're breaking up a little bit.
Reports. I'm sorry, can you hear me a little better now?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to discuss closing and archiving the payroll data for Sage 100 version 21, the Aatrix integration for federal and state reports, tax deposits, and quarterly reports, the year-end payroll reporting, W-2s, W-3s, state forms, and filing options, year-end vendor reporting, reviewing your vendor balances, then generating 1099 forms, 1096 forms, and other filing options. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the other resources available to you, Sage City, Sage University, the Sage Knowledge Base, and of course, your consultant. So the first thing that I want to mention is that versions 19 and 20 of Sage 100 are no longer supported for the current tax year. Some of you may have already upgraded to version 21 or received the download link. If not, you'll want to move to this version as soon as possible. Version 21 has all the updated payroll calculation rates and also all the updated federal and state reports. So your consultant can help you with this change. You can also reach out to Sage support for assistance. So these items are the basic housekeeping items for your Sage 100 Contractor accounting program. These should be completed each year before you complete your payroll archive, creating company backup, payroll audits, adjusting your calculation settings so that you have the W-2 box information filled out, and then setting up the Affordable Care Act items. So we'll go over all these shortly. Your payroll data needs to be archived every year, so you're going to be completing these processes every year prior to that. And Sage also recommends that you archive your fiscal data, which is all your GL data for your company, every other year. Once you advance your default posting period to January of 2019, all posting periods in 2019 will become available. So just keep that in mind as you're completing these processes. And also, just keep in mind that most activities that are tied to this year-end webinar require exclusive access. You don't want anybody entering data while you're trying to close out the year and move to the new posting period. So the first thing that I want to mention is that you need to have a backup of your company database before you complete the payroll archive. You should make sure that you have a backup stored somewhere. Your IT company may have an off-site backup already running for you. If not, you can also create an on-demand backup using the database administration tool on the server. So I'm going to show you that really quickly. This is the database administration tool. Keep in mind that this is only on your server, so you're going to need to work with your IT consultant or your in-house admin that has remote access to get to this database administration tool. If you want to create an on-demand backup of your company, you can choose this tune-up, backup, restore option here, and then backup companies. Select the company you want to back up, and then click Create Backup down here. So this is one option for you, an on-demand backup of your company. You can also create a nightly maintenance schedule. So you choose the company, and then you choose the hour that you want Sage to create nightly backups and how long you want Sage to keep the backups. So if you choose 2 weeks, once you get to 2 weeks and 1 day, it's going to delete the oldest backup and replace it with the new backup. So Those are the two options that you can use on database administration. Again, your IT company may have some backup setup already in place, but you'll want to make sure to store company backup on a flash drive, another folder on your server, or at least confirm that the nightly backup is in place. So that's step one. Step two is to complete a payroll audit. In order to advance to the next year in Sage 100, you're going to have to complete a payroll audit. So you can do that at the 537 window. I'm in the archive company, so I'm going to go back. At the 537 window, there's two options for you. You can click this audit button here, and it's going to go through all of your payroll records and let you know if you have any issues tied to them. Sample company doesn't have any audit errors, but it does have uncomputed and unposted records. So you can print out a list of that. I'm not going to do that here. But what many of you may want to do is just skip to this repair button. If there are small mistakes that Sage can fix automatically, it will repair those mistakes and just show you the items that it couldn't fix. So if there's still items left after the repair, then it gives you a simple list of records that you need to address before completing your payroll archive. So for the sample company, the only issue is tied to the uncomputed and unposted records, so I just need to post these. But if you have any issues that you need to correct, you can work with your consultant, you can work with your CPA, and just make sure that you complete journal adjustments to fix your payroll prior to archiving. So the next step involves assigning your payroll calculations to W-2 boxes. So you can see here, in the corner, there's a place to enter a W-2 box and a W-2 code. So I'll show you in the program. At the 531 screen, you can see that employee 401k is one that definitely needs to be entered with box information. So this calculation already has the box information entered, box 12, code D. There's a little cheat sheet on the PowerPoint for items in box 12. So here's all of the codes associated with box 12. You can just review your calculations and see if any of them need to be in box 12 with these codes. There's also box 14 items on this cheat sheet here. These box 14 items don't have a code like the box 12 items. So for union dues is one example. If you go to the union dues calculation, enter the box number here, and then you make up your own code that will identify the payroll calculation to you. It's an 8-character limit, so you could do something like union 20 dues, or whatever works, whatever will remind you of what this code needs to be. So I want to make sure to fill out box 12 and box 14 at that 531 window. Once your W-2 is set up, we need to review the Affordable Care Act items. The Affordable Care Act has been in effect with specific reporting requirements for a few years. You may want to check with your accountant, your third-party provider, your insurance agent to make sure that you are following your reporting requirements. And Sage 100 Contractor has built-in ACA reporting. So we'll go over all that in a second. This is the first setup window that we need to go to, 521. So this is the employee window, and the first thing you need to do is go to this ACA tab and fill out all this information for all of your employees. So if they consent for electronic ACA, you can check off this box. You can select year, and then you need to fill in their work status, full-time, part-time. Whatever you select, it's going to autofill for the rest of the year. So just keep that in mind. If they switch mid-year, you can make changes and it will continue to autofill. The offer of coverage code and the safe harbor code, these are defined in the ACA, and you can speak with your provider to see which codes apply to you. Kind of fill these in. And again, if they change mid-year, you can change and it'll continue to autofill the months. You can enter the share of the minimum plan premium here for the months for this employee. And then if you are an employer that provides self-insured coverage, you can also add dependents here. So names, relationship, social, date of birth, and then you want to check off the months that they had coverage. And again, it continues to autofill with the checks. So this is step one for the ACA. You want to make sure to do this for all of your employees. Step two would be to go to the 522 payroll record screen and review the ACA hours that are recorded here. So you'll notice these two boxes on every payroll record. As long as you have time card data filled out, so on this time card tab in the grid, then Sage should calculate these hours for you automatically. You can see this employee has 40 regular hours, and that's the number here. If this time card grid is blank, then it's not going to calculate automatically for you. So like salaried employees, like this employee, you can enter your own hours, and Sage will just highlight them in red so that you know this is a record that you adjusted. So you're going to want to be aware of that and just review all of your payroll records. Probably want to do this weekly as you go through if possible, but just confirm that all the ACA hours are correct here. So once all that's done, then you can go to the 543 window, and you can look at these two ACA reports just to get an idea of your full-time equivalent count. You plug in the year, and then you can see this is the sample company, so the data is not all there, but it gives you your total hours and your full-time equivalent count, and this will help you determine if you know, what type of reports you need to file. And there's also a chart in the PowerPoint. So employers with 50 or more full-time employees, including full-time equivalents, that are required to offer health insurance coverage, they need to report enrollment information under the Affordable Care Act, and they can do this with forms 1094 and 1095. This chart gives you guidelines for which version you should file, the B or C forms, or if you don't have to file at all. And it depends on the amount of employees you have and whether or not you're self-insured. And all this information is obtainable at the irs.gov website. So if you need any additional info, you can go there. So once all those pre-archive steps are completed, we can review the closing and archiving. Just one more quick thing before we get to that. You may want to go and count your payroll records before you complete your archive process. So you can do that at 522, the same window we were just at when we were reviewing the ACA hours. If you click File, Count, it's going to tell you how many payroll records you have saved at this window. So this will give you an idea. You want to make sure that this number matches once you complete your payroll archive, because all of your payroll data gets moved to that archive company and cleared from your active company. So you can just double check that the record counts match. But once you're done with that, you can start the archive. Just going to show you the screen real quick. This is for version 19. So the payroll archive for versions 21 and 20 is built into that database administration tool that we use to create the backups. For version 19, it's still in the program at the 538 window. You can click here to get a year-end guide, and you can also decide which employees you want to remove from your employee pool, just whatever statuses you want to remove. And if you check off this box, you can approve each employee's removal. So it's a very similar process with 20 and 21, but in 19, it's built into the program. So I wanted to show you this really quickly. And I also wanted to mention, you're going to get a bunch of warnings as you complete your payroll archive. The most important one is just that you're not going to be able to process payroll for the new year until you complete your archive for the previous year. So we're going to need to archive your 2018 data before you can enter 2019 data. So here's a screenshot of the database administration tool. I'm just going to show you in the tool again. But we created our backups here. You can create your nightly maintenance here, and they also have archive options, archive company data. So you can archive your oldest fiscal year, which again, Sage recommends you do every other year. We're not going to do that today just because you don't have to do it every year. We're going to do the payroll data archive. And you can see that this screen is very similar to the version 19 screen. If you click this box, it takes you to a Sage guide. So this is the year-end guide that Sage puts together, and it goes through a lot of the steps that we're covering today. So you can use that as a backup when you're reviewing the webinar. You're going to select the company you want to create the archive from. And I created the archive ahead of time, so that's why this name is here. But kind of standard practice is that you label the type of archive it is and then the year of the archive, so that when you look at the company information, it's very clear when you're selecting what archive you're looking at. And then all of these are the employee statuses. Again, you can check all these off if you want to remove any employees with these statuses, or if you want to approve each employee's removal one by one, you can do that also. So I'm not going to create the archive. I did that ahead of time to save us a bit of time. So once your payroll archive is complete, what happens is Sage creates a totally separate company database and moves all of your payroll data into that company database. So your current company is going to not have any payroll data in it for the new year, and all of that payroll data is going to be stored in the archive. And you're going to want to go into that archive to generate your Aatrix reports. Aatrix is a third-party program. It's included with your Sage 100 Contractor software, and you can use it for regular payroll filing. So you'll get a little familiar with it today. If you're not already using it, we're going to go through a couple of the processes. So if you go to the 541 screen, it shows all of your federal filing options. So the 1094 and 1095 that we just talked about for the Affordable Care Act, the annual 940, quarterly 941s, weekly federal tax deposits, they're all here. We're going to focus on the W-2s and W-3s right now for the payroll archive. Just remember that when you're looking in your current company, your payroll data is not going to be there, so you need to switch over to the archive company. They give you constant reminders when you're in the archive company that it's not an archive, and they also have this red background. So you can turn them off as you kind of move forward. But when you go into the 541 screen, I'm going to turn off the reminders. This is where you can see all of your options. I'm going to choose to generate the W-2s and W-3s, and I'm going to select the current year. So Aatrix kind of runs through all of your Sage 100 data, and Setup Wizard's going to pop up in a second. But before we start going, I just want to show you that this is a form sample, just to show you where things show up, even though it's a little old. When you start to generate your Aatrix forms, every time you do this, Aatrix is going to prompt you to complete an automatic update. So I already did mine for today, but it's constantly updating your federal and state reports to make sure that it follows the new guidelines. So you're going to want to complete these automatic updates each time you log in and create any Aatrix reports. So just keep that in mind. But this is the W-2 setup wizard, so it's going to take you through a couple of setup questions. Do we have, you can actually process your W-2s and W-3s. You can test drive the process with 25 of your employees, or you can test it with all of your employees. I'm going to do the test drive for today. Here's your company EIN information. It's pulling this information from 7.1 company information, so you want to make sure that company name and address information, phone numbers, tax IDs are all filled out here, state tax IDs. That's where it pulls all your company information from. And then there's just a few other setup questions. Do we have multiple payroll data files under the same EIN? No, we just have one. Here's all your address information. You want to make sure to double check this and then also enter any contact information down here when you're actually filing your W-2s and W-3s. I'm filing for my company. I'm not a third party, so you can choose either option. So here's all your state and local tax items. You want to make sure that you add your tax account numbers. So they're highlighted in red here. I'm just going to plug in numbers so that we can move on to the next step. And then if you had any local items that you needed to add, you could do that, but I'm just going to leave these for now. A couple more setup questions. Do you have any employees that are exempt from Medicare, Social Security taxes? Any employees that are members of the clergy? Do you want to use control numbers on your W-2s, which are, internally assigned numbers to track them? And then do you have any employees that elected to receive electronically? So I'm just going to answer no for all these. Again, internal control number, if you want to use it, you can enter it here for your W-3. That's what kind of payer you are. So I imagine that most of you are 941 payers, but if you needed to check off another box, you can here. They also have options for 501c non-government, state and local government, or federal government here. I'll select that none apply. If you need to enter any third-party sick pay, you can check off the box and fill out the information here. Need to enter an establishment number, any other EINs used this year, and if business was terminated this year, you can check off this box. I'm just going to leave all those blank. So just give it a minute. It's pulling information from Sage and all of the setup information. Reminds you that you're in test drive mode. So anything that you enter here is not going to be saved. The other thing I want to mention is that anything that you change in this Aatrix window here is not going to be pushed back into Sage 100. So if you find something that's off, you probably want to change it in Sage 100 and then rerun this W-2 process with Aatrix. So this is the next window in Aatrix. The step that it wants you to complete is on the top left in blue here. And then everything highlighted in blue, all the columns highlighted in blue, are associated with this step. So the first step of this process is to review all the employee information. Right, so only the columns highlighted in blue, they all look good for now. So we're going to go on to the next step. If you need to check off any of these boxes, you can for third-party sick pay, retirement plan. You can check off any boxes if they apply to your employees. I'm not going to do that now. Ask you to verify the Social Security tips here. So this is all of your wage information. You can fill in tips if you need to, or you can leave those blank. Now it asks you to verify state wages. So you can review these two columns. It's just these two blue columns here. If anything looks off as Aatrix is going through each step, it's going to give you this error message, potential issues have been discovered, and highlighted in yellow. So it's just saying that local wages were found, but no state wages were found. So you can continue without correcting, but I'm going to go back and look at this. So looks like we have SDI wages, but there's no associated state wages. So just going to plug in a number to fix that and move on to the next step. So now it asks us to verify the unassigned columns. So this is partly what we were looking at before. Notice that the employee 401k calculation is assigned to box 12D. So all of these other calculations are just unassigned, and you need to determine if they should be assigned, and if they should, you can assign them right within here. But remember that this is not going to push back into Sage 100 Contractor. So if you edit the information here, you should edit it in 100. So we'll do employee paid health as an example. You can click to assign it to box 14 as other, and then you're going to want to give it a code that will indicate to you which calculation it is. So this one will do health. And there's a 8-character limit here also, so just keep that in mind. Now that box is green, so you have to do this for all of your calculations. Just determine if they need to be assigned or not, and then you can assign them in here and in Sage. I'm not going to assign all of them now just to save some time. So I have a bunch of errors. I'm just going to continue without correcting just because this is the sample company. And then again, it gives you one more warning. So once you complete that full setup process, it shows you the e-filing offer, right? You can just skip this. You don't have to e-file, especially in the test drive. So we can switch to other options, print my employee W-2s, print my federal W-2s, and click next. One more offer for e-filing. And then it asks you if you want to include divider sheets between report sets. And it shows you the reports that it's going to print. So you give it a second, and it's going to take your Aatrix data and your Sage data and just generate the reports for you. Okay, so this is the first report, the employee W-2. So you can send all these out. It's 45 pages. I'm not going to print any of this. I'm just going to go to the next step. Now it generates the employer W-2 copy. So, fewer pages, but this is for your records. It has a note here that you can enter, or you can have the perforated W-2 paper. So you don't have to use the pre-printed red sheets anymore. You can have the white perforated sheets. I'm just going to click cancel and move on to the next step. So now here's your federal W-2 copy, the 941. And then the federal W-3 summary sheet that you can sign and enter your title and send off. And then the notice to your employees. So you can copy this and include these with your W-2s. That's the full test drive process. Again, you can set up an e-file account for when you actually want to complete your W-2s and W-3s, or you can print them out using Aatrix. Either option works. So I'm going to get caught up a little bit in the PowerPoint. This was the first screen with the W-2 setup wizard that we went through. And then here's all these following screens. All of these are the setup items before you get to the actual screen where you can review your information. This is zoomed in a bit much, but remember that on the top left, the blue step is the step that you need to currently work on, and then any columns highlighted in blue, those are the items that are associated with this step. So you want to review those columns. This is one sample error that we saw earlier. E-filing options, which you can take advantage of if you want. Your printing options that we just went through, and then the forms that we just looked at. So that's the full W-2 and W-3 process. So you could take advantage of those using Aatrix and a bunch of federal processes, but you can also file state reports through Aatrix at the 542 screen. So all the states have different requirements. Accordance in New Jersey, so they have the NJ 500, 927, WR 30. PA has different reports. New York has different reports. So you just need to be familiar with your state's requirements, and you can file any reports you need to at this 542 window using Aatrix. So just something to take note of. So once your federal and state reporting requirements are taken care of, you want to do some vendor housekeeping and process your 1099s. These are the general reports we're going to look at today before we process the 1099s. The 41161 vendor report will give you a good idea of your vendor balances. So you don't have to enter any filtering information. You can just preview the report, and it shows vendor name, 1099 type, tax IDs, and 1099 balances for the current year and previous years if you have them in the program. So just so that everyone knows, if you go to this 4.4 window, vendor window, and the financial information tab, this is where you enter tax IDs and 1099 types. So you can backfill these if you have to, but you're going to want to try to do this as you add vendors to the system, so you don't have to do it all at year end. That's where the vendor 1099 report is pulling information from. These other reports are associated with vendor insurance information. So if you go back to this 4.4 vendors window in the bottom right corner, you can manually enter certificate information, right? Maybe this vendor supplied their GL cert last year and it expires today. Sage will give you a warning if you try to pay them. It will stop payment, but you want to try to get ahead of it if you can. So if you go to this 41141 vendor report, this will list off all of your vendors and all of the insurance certificates that you have listed and their expiration dates and any contact information. So you can use this to get a list, see which vendors are going to have expired certificates soon, and then reach out to them and ask them to give you updated certificates. If you don't want to deal with all of that, calling vendors individually, you can also go to this 41651 report. And this will create a letter for each vendor saying the certificates that are going to expire soon. So it's one page per vendor, so you can just generate this report and send out the letters. So obviously that's not required, but those are just items that you should probably address at year end. And then once all that's done, you can create your 1099 reports through Aatrix. So if you go to the 4.5 window, a lot of this process is going to seem very similar to the W2 and W3 process. You select which report you want to generate, you choose your year, and you click to run report. If you didn't update your Aatrix reports before, it's going to prompt you to update them now, but we already took care of that. So now for the 1099 setup wizard, we're going to choose the same option. We're going to test drive with all of the recipients. Pulls in your tax ID from the company information screen. We have one data file for our EIN. Pulls in all this information again, and you're going to want to add contact information when you actually file your 1099s and 1096s. I'm filing for my company. If you're a third party, you can check off this box here. No state or local items to address for the sample company here, but if you have any, you can add those tax account numbers like we did for the W2s. And then I'm just going to leave this as no. Nobody elected to receive electronically. So this screen is tied to the 1099s. Do you want to truncate the identification numbers? I'm just going to leave it with no truncation, but there's two other options here if you want to take advantage of those. And then if any of these ID numbers are blank, you can leave them blank or you can print zeros. I'll just leave the default option here. So it goes through the same setup process, pulls in all your data from Sage and all of your setup data that you just went through, reminds you you're in test drive mode, and then here is the screen. The blue step is to verify the taxpayer identification numbers, all here. They all look fine, so we'll go to the next step. If the EIN is the same as the taxpayer identification number, you can check off this box. We're all checked right now, so we'll move on to the next step. Verify the names and addresses of the recipients. So you can put first name, last name, middle name, and then all of the business information, taxpayer IDs, company names, address information. So you want to review all this and make sure that all that's accurate. Country code, account number, if any of that needs to be included, you can fill it out or you can go to the next step. Asks you to verify all the income boxes. So it looks like all of these recipients are classified as non-employee compensation. So they're all under one category, but you can spread these out if you need to. You need to confirm the filing state. This is for the sample company and it's all in California. And then this is just kind of an overall check. It asks you to review all of your information and notice that none of this is really highlighted in blue. So it's just one last double check before you move on to the next step. So once you finish, it's going to give you this e-file offer again. We're not going to e-file, we're going to choose to print. We're going to print our recipient copies, our federal copies, and our state copies. Another e-file offer. Just skip that. It should list any states that you may need to file for here. You can check and uncheck and only file for specific states if you want. It's going to leave California checked off. And then again, you can include divider sheets if you want. This is a quick summary of the reports that it's going to generate for you. So the first report is the federal 1099 copy. The second report is the federal 1096 summary sheet that you can sign and send off. Now the state copy, state 1099. I'm not going to print any of these. The recipient 1099 copy. The state 1096 summary sheet. You can sign and send that. So click cancel. The instructions for the recipients, you can print a few copies of this. And then your copy that you can keep on file at the office. So it goes through all your copies. And this is the end of the test drive for the 1099s and 1096s. I just suggest that you run through the test drive first, like I said earlier, so that you can review all your data and see if there's anything that you need to gather, and then you can enter it in Sage and then just recreate these reports. Run another test drive if you need to. So this is the vendor screen that we looked at. Remember, you can, under the financial information tab, you can add tax ID numbers and 1099 types. This is just a sample copy of the 1099. And I know it's an old form, but the forms don't change too much year to year. So just an example for you to look at. And in the top left, the step that's highlighted in blue is the step that you need to focus on in the Aatrix wizard. And the columns highlighted in blue are the columns that this step is referring to. So just another sample of that in case you're looking at the webinar without being in Sage. So if you still need assistance after reviewing the webinar, then you can look at any of these resources. Sage City has a complete section on year-end filing. The knowledge base is a place where you can type in specific questions, and there's a few answers for your questions. Sage University offers a variety of learning opportunities, and they have a lot of videos on specific topics. And then, of course, Accordant is available to assist. If you don't have an Accordant consultant, you can call the number listed here, and you will be assigned a consultant. So that's the end of the webinar. If you have any questions, you can type them to Krista, and she'll read them off. Hopefully we can answer any questions you may have.
Okay, we have a couple waiting here. So first one is, if we don't offer insurance, do we still need to fill out ACA stuff?
So any ACA reporting requirements, I would just go to that irs.gov website and check that out. It was a little further back now. This chart might be helpful for you. You can use this chart, but I don't want to provide, too specific of information on the ACA just because I'm not familiar. If you're not self-insured and you have fewer than 50 employees, you can see that there's no reporting requirements if you're in that situation. But if you have 50 or more full-time equivalents and if you're self-insured, there are filing requirements. So hopefully this answers your question. If not, I would go to the irs.gov website and you can get more information on what's required there.
Okay. The next question is, so I am understanding correctly, for W-2 submittals to the state of Pennsylvania, I can just file my W-2s from Aatrix instead of setting up a file for eTides. Aatrix will know what I need. In PA, they are no longer accepting paper W-2s. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, you can e-file all of your federal and state reports in Sage. It has the Aatrix is constantly updating so that it stays in line with the new regulations. So 541 is where you can find all the federal forms. 542 is where you can find all the state forms. So you should be able to file state W-2s also.
Okay, the next question is, will the 1099 form print on blank paper, or do we need to order forms onto which to print the data?
I believe you need the white perforated sheets. I don't think you need the pre-printed sheets anymore, but I think you need the white perforated. For the test drive, if you're just trying to see what the forms will look like, you can go through the test drive and print on regular paper. I just don't know that you can actually submit in white perforated sheets.
Where do you get the perforated paper for the 1099?
You can order it online or go to Staples. I'm sure they have it.
Okay, if you have any more questions, type them in the box. Right now, that's the end of the list. Just give it another minute. Oh, here we go. Do you close payroll from the archive? We should close payroll prior to changing period 1, correct?
So you should move to period 1. If you go to, I'm just going to go back to the active company. And you change your posting.
You're breaking up, Steve.
2019. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
So when you're in 2018, I'm going to change my posting period to December of 2018 now. So you have to go to period 12 in order to move it to period 1 of the new year. And then once you move it to period 1 of the new year, it opens all of the posting periods for next year. So you can change your posting period to January of the new year, but it's not going to let you enter new payroll information until you archive your 2018 data. Right here, just because I'm doing the webinar with this sample and the archive sample, it doesn't look exactly right, but all of these payroll records are removed from your active company when you archive, so that there's no 2018 data included with your 2019 data. So you can move to January 2019 of the new year and then archive, but you're not going to be able to post any payroll until you archive. So you just want to make sure to do that before you start entering any 2019 info.
Okay, the last question is, if a terminated employee is tied to a job, they will not be removed when I close payroll. Therefore, do I have to close out the old jobs first and then close payroll?
Yeah, so we didn't go over the fiscal archive process, but when you complete the fiscal archive, which you should do every other year, you can close that are completed. So if you change your job status to closed on this window and you do your fiscal fiscal archive, it's going to clear out any jobs with that status. And then you can complete your payroll archive afterwards. And once there's no job in the system that it can be tied to, that employee will be removed. So you'll probably want to do your fiscal archive also.
Okay, one more question. When do I update the tax updates after archiving payroll?
So you should complete the update as soon as possible. Version 21 is the newest version, and it's going to have the updated tax rates for the new year. It's not going to go back and change any of the payroll information that's already posted. So you can upgrade to 21 at any time, and you're going to want to do that for the new year anyway for the 2019 data. But it also is going to have the updated Aatrix reports. So you should upgrade to 21 as soon as you can. And there's no huge difference between 20 and 21. All of the the processes are the same, and you can find everything in database administration that you need. It's really version 19 that isn't supported anymore and has all that stuff built into the program. So it doesn't have database administration for 19.
Okay, next question. For a salaried employee for the ACA hours, should I use 40 hours for each payroll?
I'm not sure the exact ruling on that. I can look into that more and get back to you if you could just send us your information. But I believe, yeah, 40 hours would be the standard that you would put for that.
I have her information here.
Okay.
Another question, I have version 21.2. Is that the latest?
Yeah, I believe so. If you need to check your version, you can go to this Home and Resources tab and then click About Sage 100 Contractor. And then here's your version. So 21.2.107. I believe that's the latest. As long as you're on, you always want to be on the latest version, but as long as you're on 21 or 20, you're going to be able to use this database administration tool on the server for your company backups and your archives. But just a reminder with this too, that you're going to need to work with your IT to get server access. This is only on the server. So, and the other thing, I don't know if I mentioned this, but with your backups, all of your backups are going to be stored on your server in this Sage 100 Con folder. So if you go to Sage 100 Con backup, your nightly backups and your on-demand backups are going to be stored here. So I don't know if I mentioned that previously, but you're going to need to work with your IT consultant or your in-house IT admin to get access to this.
Okay, that's all the questions we have. So if you do have any other questions, you can always feel free to contact us by replying to the email with the recording that will be sent out later today or with the contact information that Steve put up on the screen before. So thank you everyone for attending today's session, and we will send out the recording later today. Happy holidays to everybody, and see you next time.
All right, thank you.